Hey, hello everyone. This is Daniel Garland. Today, myself, Cody Leong, and Jay Riggs are going to be talking to you guys about the concept from Chapter 8A, which is regarding motivation in relation to the country we've chosen, which is Lithuania. Now, before we begin, a little context. Lithuania holds a special place in my heart. This is where I studied abroad last semester. I got to know a lot about the culture, the language, and their recent and even ancient history. So, without further ado, let's begin. Before we get too far into it here, we have the Lithuanian flag as the banner in the background. Just a little details for you. So, their colors are red, green, and gold. These symbolize, starting from the bottom, the red, meaning the bloodshed that was unfortunately needed to liberate their nation from the USSR. The green represents their forest and natural landscapes, which is dotted with lots of farms and rich agriculture. The gold represents the sunshine, which, metaphorically speaking, is always shining on them. More on that later because the winter months are not very sunny. Now, you also have access to our cultural overview document. I won't go into the whole thing, but I'll just give you a little flashpoint here, some of the important pieces I thought would be worthwhile to share here in the presentation. Let's give a little brief overview on their history. So they have unfortunately had a rough last couple hundred years. In particular, starting in World War One, they were occupied by Germany, which once Nazis Germany rose to power around World War Two, they re-invaded them and put a lot of people, unfortunately, into camps and killed a lot of citizens. The Museum of Occupation Freedom Fighters is an unfortunate reminder in the capital city of Vilnius of the tragedies that occurred not only under Nazi Germany, but under the USSR as well, which liberated them from Germany during World War II, but they were not, as we know, kindly liberators. They were there to stay. So Lithuania became an extension of Russia, and the persecution against those who spoke out against the Russian state or wanted to, you know, have Lithuania go to the West. They were here in this actual building was once a prison. Freedom fighters were often imprisoned, tortured, and then executed and publicly displayed for others as a warning. It's quite a somber place to visit, and it was quite moving to see in person. The pictures will not do it justice. Speaking of World War II, though, the next photo on the right is the government building in downtown Klaipėda. This is where Hitler, once occupying Lithuania, once the German forces came in again, this is where he would give victory speeches. Now it is a stark contrast to where it once was. This here is the tree lighting festival, and it's, again, you would not know this was once a Nazi-occupied building. It's now a place of community and celebration. More on their history, going back even further than the last couple hundred years, is ancient Lithuania here, or I should say more like medieval, because this is one of the castles, one of many over there. This is Castle Truckee. It is in the middle of a lake, only accessible by boat or a very thin bridge going across the water. Again, pictures will not do it justice. It's quite beautiful, and it's not unfamiliar to be seeing either little random rundown castle towers or on rare occasions a fully intact and refurbished castle like the one here. Lastly, we have the downtown square of their now capital city of Vilnius. Here we have the one of the churches and cathedrals, one of many actually in their city, and it's quite beautiful to see in person. That's a brief overview on the history. A little context for the religion in Lithuania. They are now predominantly Catholic, followed by Orthodoxy, with some sprinkling of Protestantism in there. But however, they were the last European nation to adopt Christianity and the last stronghold for paganisms. You can still find remnants of paganism in Lithuania. Most where I noticed was often in like wood carvings or the odd statue here and there, sometimes out in forests or on hiking trails. But here in on the left, this is in downtown Klaipėda where I stayed, you would often, not often, excuse me, you would sometimes see wood carvings like this regarding old pagan deities. It's just a reminder of their history and its cultural artifacts. Nowadays, as I said, they are predominantly Catholic. This next picture in the middle is a shrine to Mary of the Lourdes Grotto. This is found in the small village of Katinga, where my group and I visited a Catholic mass. And on the right, this is from the cathedral in Vilnius on the inside. And needless to say, I think they do churches a little bit better over there. They're very extravagant, very beautiful. And it's just they have a different way of worshiping than I think most of our, at least from what I've seen, most of our churches do over here. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the socialization aspect of their culture. So they're predominantly, I would say, introverted. Um, However, that does not mean they're without communal gatherings. So, for instance, a communal gathering here would be us going out to dinner at a Japanese restaurant and just enjoying each other's company. These are fellow students from the school I went to, LCC. And then on the left of that, you can see friends and families gathering on the Baltic coast during the very few times the sun comes out, which is roughly around April to mid-October. So when the weather warms up, everyone's out on the beach, everyone's soaking up that vitamin D and just getting as much of it as they can. And again, it's while they're not very extroverted, they stick with their friends and families and will share special moments like this. Another aspect of social life would be their love for basketball. So this here on the middle right is a game at LCC. We have a Ukrainian student playing against a Lithuanian student from Vilnius here. This is their national sport and something they're very proud of and will get defensive over that I've noticed when I was there. Bottom right, again, that's the tree lighting ceremony. This one was at a different time of night when I took this, but again, you can see a crowd of people there, friends and family celebrating the changing of seasons and in preparation for Christmas. And then this last one, upper right, is a balcony shot of the downtown city of Klaipėda. They had shopping malls, movie theaters, and a bunch of little mom and pop stores sprinkled throughout. And this, again, while not very extroverted, people stick with their friends and sometimes family and would go out on little outings and enjoy each other's company. But during the winter months, not so much. People tend to stay indoors. So that's about it for the overview. More can be found in our document. Let's talk a little bit about key terms here, what we're going to be discussing today from the chapter. So our chapter is on motivation. Today we're going to be talking about self-enhancement, self-esteem, self-serving bias, the downward and upward social comparison complex, internal versus external attribution, the concept of reflected glory, compensatory self-enhancement and discounting, and lastly, characteristics of face. My colleagues and I will each be tackling different topics here, so let's begin with my section. Um, Before we introduce that, however, I did get in contact with a friend I made over there. This is her on the right. Her name is Ugne Astrokaite. I asked her a couple questions here, a little bit about herself, her culture, and then about concepts relating to the chapter. So without further ado, let's begin. I was hoping to get a Zoom interview with her, but however, due to a 10-hour time difference and just conflicting schedules, we weren't able to make that happen. So she was gracious enough to give us a text response. So I will go ahead and read them off here. So first we asked her her name, how long she's lived in Lithuania, and a little brief snippet about the culture. Ugne says she's lived there her whole life, and they're a very quiet people, not as big or loud as America, but we admire your values and try to imitate them over here. We enjoy movies, shoppings, but it's all smaller. I'm studying psychology, and I would say we are very introverted. We like people, but are slow to trust. Given our history, it is understandable. I was born after the occupation, but it is still fresh in older adults' minds. The next question we asked her was, how important is the concept of face, which is how others in society view you within Lithuanian's culture? She wrote, I mean, it is important, but we do not go around thinking about it all day. We want to appear successful, like owning a car, which not like America, where everyone has one. We use buses and trains. But yes, it's not good to be seen as homeless or having mental health problems. We are changing that, but it takes time. We then asked her, in your culture, is the concept of having personal growth and reflection commonly known and appreciated? She says, I wouldn't say it's appreciated, but it is expected to always do your best. It is important to grow as a person, and for some, their faith too. Some people do not value growth, but I don't think that is normal. Next, we asked her, is it praised for someone to admire their strengths, or is that seen more as egotistical? And she says, it depends. Like, if you are always bragging about how good you are at this or that, then no, it is not good. But if, say, you're in a group project and you tell your team you have more experience in certain areas, that benefits the team. That is helpful. It all depends, really. If you are humble, then that is good. And then lastly, we asked, would you say people in Lithuania are more prone to upward social comparison, which we'll get into that later? It's comparing yourself to more people advanced than yourself, or downward social comparison, which is when you compare to people less advanced than you. She wrote, well, like I said, we don't like to see people who are not doing good, homeless or drug users, but I don't think we actively compare ourselves to them. It's more, oh, that person is not good or they have a problem. But for people who are better off, yes, we want to be successful. And when we see others doing well, we want to be like them, like you guys. We see how good it is over in America, and we want to have that over here. So again, that was from my friend Ugne. We had a social psychology class together, and she's a good friend. So let's begin with the first concept here. I don't know if I can move my screen there. So that's their coat of arms there. Let me put that. There we go. Okay, so our first concept I'm going to be discussing is self-esteem and Lithuania. So, self-esteem, as I'm sure most of us know, is the level of positivity when we evaluate ourselves. In regards to Lithuania, there's an ongoing mental health crisis linked to their culture. So, many citizens over there unfortunately do suffer from chronic depression, which there are a number of factors for that. There's a high prevalence of suicide, and they have, I believe, the highest alcoholism rate in Europe. And actually, here on the left, this was at a little pizzeria pub that my friends and I went to. This is a local, and that's not, we'll just say that's not water that he's drinking there. And needless to say, all six of those were consumed in short succession, and it was completely normal for him. So it's very sad to see, but it is very prevalent in their culture. Um, but again, self-esteem is not typically discussed, as we mentioned earlier. It's sometimes seen as egocentric or it's boasting. So there's a tendency for people to remain socially isolated. Now, I found a study actually done by a Lithuanian here that showed that in order to kind of draw particularly young men who are struggling with social isolation and depression, there is, it's been proven, excuse me, to have a positive effect when they are within a structured context, particularly regarding sports. So again, with basketball being their national sport, they found that there's a correlated increase in self-esteem and social skills in young Lithuanian men, which I found quite fascinating. And furthermore, I got an additional study here, also from a Lithuanian psychology student, I believe, she found that Lithuanian men have a lower suicide rate when they foster a more positive self-image, particularly regarding their masculinity. So if that is not associated in their life, then they're more likely had a negative outlook on themselves, like, oh, I'm not a man because I'm not, wealthy or I'm not providing enough for my family. And it's a very kind of, I wouldn't quite say an honor-bound sense, but it's very much that there needs to be this nurtured and fostered positive regard for oneself as a provider. Um, the next concept I had to talk about here is the self-serving bias. This is the tendency to exaggerate one's positive characteristics. And again, with Lithuania being a predominantly introverted country, people are not likely to hype themselves up for social points, unlike you might see over here in the West. Moving on, we have social comparison. Social comparison, in particular downward, is when an individual compares their performance with someone who is doing worse than themselves. While not overt, Lithuanians have a tendency to look down on those who are wasting their life. And again, there's very few homeless people over there that I noticed. And those that are very kind of seen as they, again, have problems, they're not doing well, or as I said, wasting their life. Upward social comparison, on the other hand, is more prominent because it's the reverse effect where people compare themselves to someone who's doing better. Tying everything back into basketball, it's not uncommon to hear Lithuanians say that, oh, I want to be the best basketball player or the next Arvydas Sabonis, who actually, as you can see in the bottom right here, played for the Oregon Trail Blazers, 1991 to 1998. It's also possible that this upward social comparison might be contributing to the mental health struggle over there. However, I'm also willing to bet with the recent history of occupation, lack of sunlight during, I'd say, like 70% of the year, there's also other contributing factors, but it's not unwise to rule out that social comparison is one of those factors. Next, we have external versus internal attribution. External is when you're interpreting life outcomes, for example, a poor grade, as factors that are outside of your control. As far as I can compare it to Lithuania, it was common to hear grumblings of government mismanagement, and they're just people who want to make themselves rich. And for instance, cost of living is not great over there, and quality of life is often blamed upwards from what I experienced at least. Internal attribution is when you're interpreting the outcome of an event as something that you yourself did. For example, I received a poor grade because I did not have time due to my friend's wedding, etc. When success does occur, I've noticed Lithuanians were noted to attribute success to their hard work and skills. And as you can see here in the bottom left, we have someone, this is actually during the winter solstice tree lighting ceremony. He was a friend of ours. He's a very good ice skater. And again, he is not very boastful, but he attributes his skill in hockey and ice skating to years of hard work. And it's a passion of his. Next, we have reflected glory and discounting. So, discounting is when you're downplaying the perceived importance of a negative event, which, for example, I did not pass the chem test because who cares about chemistry anyway? And then when you ask, at least for me, when I would ask Lithuanians about their high rates of depression, suicide, or alcoholism, I would notice locals would often laugh or joke it off. And you'd be like, it's just part of life. So again, just discounting their struggles and experiences was something I noticed when experiencing their culture. Reflected glory. This is interesting because I think it's when you emphasize the success of your culture or your group, and this is best exemplified in two counts. On the top right here, we have the last vestiges of the USSR occupying Vilnius. The Lithuanians banded together to do a non-violent demonstration that ended up ousting out the USSR when they were starting to crumble. So there is this sense of pride that they kicked them out and retook their country. In that same note, their first Olympic Games as a basketball team, seen in the bottom left here, they ended up beating Russia and claiming the bronze medal in basketball. And it's still referred to today as like a cultural moment for them. And that's a point where they reflect on the glory they had and a sense of pride for them. So I think that was a perfect example for this concept. Now, I believe the next is going to be up to Cody and Jay. Take it away, guys.
So, key strategies for boosting self-view, compensatory self-enhancement. After experiencing failure in one area, people may focus on their strengths or success to feel better. This strategy allows others to shift their focus away from their failure and comfort themselves as they are still talented and capable in other areas. Discounting. When people fail, they may reduce the importance of the failure to weigh the negative impact on their self-esteem. For example, if someone fails a chemistry exam, they may say, "Who really needs chemistry anyways? I'm not planning on being a scientist." External attributions. People often blame external factors rather than taking responsibility for their failures. This helps their self-esteem by shifting the focus away from their abilities or shortcomings. Basking in reflecting glory. This involves associating oneself with successful individuals or groups to boost one's self-worth. For example, after a sports team wins a game, people may say, "We won the game." This helps improve their self-esteem even if they weren't personally involved in the victory. Culture different and self-enhancement. Stronger needs for positive self-view. People in Western cultures are highly motivated to keep a positive self-image, thinking that self-worth is tied to personal achievement. Recall more success than failure. They tend to remember their success more vividly than their failure, which helps keep a positive self-esteem and belief in capabilities. Engagement in self-enhancement and positive self-assessment. People in these cultures are more likely to engage in self-enhancement, focusing on their strengths and achievement to protect their self-image and maintain confidence. Eastern collectives cultures less focus on enhancing the self. People in collective cultures tend to focus less on boosting their self-image and more on improving themselves within the context of the group. More likely to remember failures, people like to recall their failures than their success, which is a focus on improvement. Value tasks more after failing them. After experiencing failure, people in these cultures often place more importance on the task, aiming to learn and improve from their experience. Endowment effect is weaker or reverse. The tendency to value owned items more than their worth is less in these cultures as they focus less on individual possession and more on other values. So some key studies, children's self-view, European American kids selected their photos for positive traits more often than Mexican American kids, which is 93% versus 82%, reflecting stronger self-enhancements. College students, Native American students list fewer positive traits than European Americans, showing culture difference in self-esteem. Memory and self-evaluation. American students recall more than Japanese students, remembers more failures, indicating different cultural perspectives of success. Self-assessment after failures. North American unrelated strengths and devalued the tasks after failure, while Japanese students focus on improving the failed task. Group identity and self-worth. Westerners boost group identity, but less so than Easterners who prioritize group success and self-worth linked by group harmony. And last is Western cultures promote self-enhancement while individuals focus on on their strengths, recall more success, and show failure to external factors. So from the first article that quoted at the end. It's overall Eastern cultures emphasize self-criticism and personal responsibility, often remembering failures more than success. And for my second in quote citation, these difference reflects culture values, independent in the West and independent in the East that influence perception.
Now we're going to talk about the concept of face and how it relates to Lithuania. According to Hein in the textbook, face is defined as the amount of social value that others will give you if you live up to the standards associated with your position. What this basically means here is that in a society, all social statuses or positions have their own set of rules, expectations, guidelines, or standards that the rest of society wants them to live by. If you follow these rules very well, you have high face, and people in that society will tend to respect you a lot more than if you do not have high face and do not follow these rules. As for whether face is commonly found more in certain cultures rather than others, it has been determined that it is more found in collectivist cultures than individualist, and it's also found more in Eastern cultures than Westernized ones, specifically in East Asia more than anywhere else. As for whether phase exists in Lithuania, there are some mixed feelings about it. There was a report done in Lithuania that determined that the citizens there tend to choose the people they respect and follow more themselves, regardless of societal position. This would suggest that face is not very relevant in Lithuania, as typically cultures where face is important choose who to respect based on societal position or power or social status. Whereas here in Lithuania, they typically tend to choose who they want to respect based on personal beliefs, desires, emotions, feelings, etc. In contrast, though, there was a study done in multiple cultures and countries, including Lithuania, that determined whether a person believes that their culture is more individualist or collectivist, mainly in a job setting. Lithuania scored a lot lower on individualism here compared to collectivism, and significantly higher on power distance, uncertainty avoidance, and masculinity, all of which are more found in collectivist cultures than individualist. This would suggest that maybe face is a little bit more important in Lithuania if Lithuania determines to be more collectivist than individualist. In determining life decisions, though, it does seem that Lithuania maybe falls back more onto individualistic ideas. In all cultures, life decisions are going to be putting a lot of pressure on a person, even more so if the culture that they're living in has their own set of expectations for these decisions, such as when a person should get married and to who, how many children should they have, what kind of jobs they should get, etc. In terms of Lithuania, it seems that the culture there is partially associated with fatalism, or the idea that a person's fate has been predetermined by either God, government decisions, or other external forces that are just simply out of their control. This would suggest that maybe face is even less relevant here in life decision, as typically when a person's going to make a life decision that they may regret, it seems here in Lithuania that this will not be seen negatively on the person, as people tend to believe that a person's fate has been predetermined, and therefore it is not on the person if they end up messing up here in life. As such, it determines that while Lithuania seems to be a little bit more individualist than collectivist, there are definitely still some collectivistic culture ideas in this culture. Thank you so much for watching, and we really hope you learned a lot more about Lithuania.